another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me, as always, is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
Doing very well, Jody. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good, too. I'm having a very nice, mellow morning as it is.
Nice. Well, you sound kind of energetic there, and I see you sipping on some tea, so you're ready to go here? You're getting pumped up?
Pumped up. I think part of it is that I'm starting to get sleep again, and sleep is a good thing.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you're finding yourself making better judgments when you're mixing or doing anything with a little bit extra sleep.
No, I'm finding I'm starting more new songs.
Okay.
And finishing old ones.
I was going to say, follow-up question, are you finishing said new songs as well?
Working on it.
Working on it. All right, good. Well, don't just start new ideas. You know all about that, right?
Oh, I do. Yeah. What about you?
So what are we talking about today, Jody?
We're talking about headphones versus monitors when it comes to mixing.
That's a pretty big subject, isn't it? Because
gigantic.
All the tools that we have. Yeah.
Grand Canyon.
It's a lot. Yeah, I got nothing to reply to that. Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's... You know, there's so many tools today out and available for us, and it can be a little bit of a jungle. One of the things that I think more and more people finding themselves doing these days is perhaps working primarily on headphones. And there are pros and cons, I guess, that come out of that, right? But
sure.
Do you have, I mean, I know your preference, but what's your thought of the sort of like pros and cons of, you know, mixing on headphones?
Pros. You can do it anywhere.
Yeah. Right?
Con, you can do it anywhere.
Why is that a con?
It's not necessarily a con. But the idea is that maybe I go out to the middle of nowhere and I'm suddenly in nature, and nature takes over in terms of my attention span. And so my mix is not focused on my mind. It's more like, hey, I'm outside in nature. Maybe I go do something else. That would be a con.
Well,
reality is
that's more of a personal problem. That's less of a headphone problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is a personal problem. Now, I would look at it from the standpoint that with headphones, there is a different way that you're hearing the mix than it is if you're in a room with a set of monitors. That's the big difference. And the pro is with headphones, you're getting a very intimate look at your mix, or a very intimate listen to your mix as compared to mixing through monitors. However, that being said, I don't use one source in terms of mixing. That's just the experience of years of saying, hey, don't do it just with one source.
Yeah, but I think if I put words in your mouth here, possibly, but I think you're going to echo this, but you do primarily your work on your studio monitors and perhaps doing some referencing on your headphones type of thing. Is that generally your workflow? But I would say you probably do 90% of your heavy lifting with your studio monitors, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
I would assume the same of you. I'm going to assume that the vast majority of you is mixing through studio monitors and just a couple of checks here and there on headphones.
Yes, absolutely. To go back to the pros and cons there, I do think the same thing can sort of go both ways. I mean, the practicality, if you are somebody that is on the move a lot, I mean, you travel and you have to deliver a mix, well, then you don't really have a choice, right? You're working on headphones. But the pros and cons that I think are beholden to both monitors and your headphones is they can be hyped. And when I say can be, I mean most of them are.
No, they all are. Everything has a hype of some sort. There's no getting around that.
But they always say, these are flat, and these are... No, they're not. Some might be, but the vast majority of things that are out there are not. And I remember listening to a certain set of speakers that were really popular about 15 years ago. Let's say that there was a... somewhat of a budget speaker of a major brand. And I think you might, I don't want to mention who they are because that's shitty, but they became really popular because oh man, they're cheap and they sound really, really good. Yeah, but they were really, really hyped, right? So it's like, oh, listen to all that bottom end or listen to that clear top end. And they were really hyped. The same thing obviously goes for headphones, right? You think, oh my God, I can hear everything. Well, it might be, but it's also that they're really hyped. So that's a con that goes both ways.
Sure.
It's handy to go back and forth, but we'll go into it a little bit more in detail down the line here. It's a good reference tool to have a decent set of headphones if you're doing the majority of your stuff on studio monitors. Maybe we should start with headphones then.
All right.
And talk about some pros and cons there. The first one that I tend to think of, I'll just kick this off, is the biggest pro for me is thinking that it takes the room out of it. Most of us, listening to this podcast as well, I'm assuming, are not in a perfectly treated, tuned room, right? So that could mean that you're sitting in a potentially really, really shitty room. And if you're dealing with a headphone situation, that takes that out of the equation, right? So
Sure.
That's a big pro right off the bat for me. Mm-hmm. You've already mentioned like mixing on the go.
Yes.
If you're somebody that's traveling, whether that is on your subway or you're flying, whatever.
Or in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere, that's, awesome. That's another one. What other things can you think of? Maybe something more negative with headphones?
Well, one thing that changes drastically between studio monitors and headphones is the stereo field.
Yeah.
Becomes, two entirely different things. That's essentially what it is, because you don't have the same stereo reference when you have headphones on your ears compared to when you're listening to something out of a set of speakers. So that's a huge difference between headphones and monitors.
Yeah, I agree. That's something that obviously we have to be aware of. And I think we can look at that as if we're looking for real definition, whether we're placing something in the stereo field, it can perhaps help to reference that with headphones, but be aware that that is something that absolutely changes. I've done that before I was really aware of that, where you just, you've been working on a mix in your headphones, and then you listen to it somewhere else, and it's like, what the hell just happened?
Not a good question to be asking yourself a lot.
No, but we all ask ourselves that a lot in the beginning, don't we? Because it's like, wow, I thought I did a decent job of this. And so, no, you didn't. Go back and work on it more.
Try again.
Yeah, exactly. But with the stereo field thing there, something that we can implement is sort of binaural panning and binaural effects, where you can get that now, where it's like spinning around in your headspace, and you get that very much only in headphones, at least as far as I'm concerned,
Sure.
or aware, I should say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, again, we're dependent on the quality of the headphones, right?
Yeah, there's another effect that kind of relates to the binaural thing.
Yeah.
And it has to do with when you take a signal that is mono, you invert the phase and double it. So you have one that's in your normal recorded state, then you have another track of it in the inverted phase, and then you delay one or two of them by X amount of samples or milliseconds, and then pan them off. In speakers, studio monitors, you'll hear that sound essentially jump out of the speakers.
Yeah, we tried that one time. I think we did on a track that you and I did together.
We've done it. I've done it more than once, but yes.
Yeah.
And in headphones, it's an entirely different concept of how that works. But out of actual speakers, when you're sitting in a prime location, it really makes that part stick out. And it's amazing how that works.
And it's because the phase cancellation thing that just gets offset, right? Because of the delay that you're doing. So it does some interesting stuff. Yeah, if you don't have that delay, you're just phase canceling, basically.
Right. But when you do actually set it with an inverted phase and you're setting the panning and then the delaying one of the signals, it gives you the effect of where that is sitting outside in a 3D space kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing too that affects the quality of what you're hearing in headphones is whether or not you have open back or closed back headphones. That makes a substantial difference. So with open back headphones, even though you're not listening to your room, you're still getting room vibe out of your hearing, which is more of a lie to me than when you have closed back headphones on.
Yeah, I'm not that read up on technically what actually happens with the room sound and all that, but my experience is that you end up losing, from a listening perspective, you end up losing more low end, because that's what tends to escape, right, from the open back more than high end. Do you have a preference? Do you like open back or closed back?
I prefer closed back.
Yeah.
That's just me. I'm not a real
Yeah.
fan of the open back setup, but some people are.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I had a pair of, it was like the AKGs with like the 240s or whatever, and I ended up getting rid of them. I just didn't like them. It was hard for me to get used to them, even with correcting software and stuff like that we'll talk about later. But
Right.
yeah, I had a hard time getting used to it.
Well, I'll tell you one thing right now is I'm setting with a pair of headphones, and it's weird to call them a pair because it's a single item with two speakers on it. So why it's called a
it's the same as a pair of scissors.
Or
right?
a pair of pants.
Right, yeah. Right.
So the idea here that I'm going after by saying what I was about to say is I'm wearing a pair of headphones that I've had for an extremely long period of time. They don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
And I know them so well that if something goes wrong with them, it's going to be a real drag to have to replace them.
Yeah.
Because they sound so great.
But do they really sound so great, or is it just that you know them so well, do you think?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, I think it's both. They sound really damn good, and I've had them for a really long time. The one thing that I like about them, and these, just to spit it out there, they are the Sennheiser HD 250 Mark II, I guess they're called. Compared to one set of my monitor speakers, the Genelex, they're not really all that close. So they have a very separate range for them. But to another set of monitor speakers that I have, which is the KRK V4 Series 2, the most recent release of the V4s, they are eerily similar in terms of, like, if I play something through the V4s and then I play something through the 250 HD2s, I'm not noticing a substantial difference.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I know that these are studio really headphone monitors, they're actually quite good in that regard.
Well, you better treat them kindly then.
Oh, I do. I mean, I've been through 2 headphone cables since I've originally owned these, and I had to replace the foam on them once.
Oh, sure. Yeah, because
but even now, if the foam goes away, I don't think I can get new foam things for them.
Really?
Yeah, they don't make any of these anymore, and I'm sure they're out of parts.
Well, be kind to them.
I am.
Be kind to them.
Very
well, good for you. All right.
What about you? I mean, do you have a set of headphones that you have stuck with now that you figured out there was that one kind that you didn't like?
The first pair of headphones that I bought that were like semi-decent, there is the Sony, it was the 7506s, whatever they're called. MDR is 7506, I think. And those are the ones I still use today. I've had these for like 20 years plus, you know. And I know that they are very hyped. And it was shocking when I started using SonarWorks. And just to see the profile of them, it's like,
do they have a profile of those?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's all I can say about it right now, because we're going to talk about it more later.
It was shocking. And it is to a point now where I go back and forth between my studio monitors, and I'll go and reference something in, my headphones. And if I don't remember to switch the profile in SonarWorks, it is jarring to listen to. It's like, oh my God, Yeah, it's very, very interesting. The event of SonarWorks, when I saw that first time, I think it was a NAMM. I can't remember the year it was, but you and I were there and somebody else. And it was, just seeing like all the profiles. When I just see that they monitored these, like they've checked them and scoped them out, and you see like, they're supposed to be so-and-so good. Yeah, they sound really, really good because there's like a 5 dB boost at 10K, It's like, so you may not make the best mix decisions when it comes to those. But like you said, we'll go back into those. But yeah, I've thought about switching to a different set, and maybe somebody who's listening can clue me in what you guys are using, and maybe I'll try something else just to kind of mix it up a little bit. But,
not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. With that, we're going to take a word from our sponsors. And now we're going to move on to
monitors.
Yeehaw.
As in speakers that are sitting in your studio.
Or in your recording and mixing room, if it's your mix room.
Wherever you're doing your work, they're probably sitting in front of you at somewhat of like maybe a 45-degree angle, hopefully, creating that nice little triangle between your head and the speakers. You mentioned what you are using. You are using your KRK Mark 2.
Well, they're the V4 by KRK,
V4.
and I think it's the Series 2 because it's the recent re-release from a couple of years ago.
There was a fair bit of upgrading going on in those because I know you were, when you first heard them, you were like, I got to have these.
Yes.
Right?
So it's a friend of mine by the name of Rich Renken, who was working at KRK at the time, or rather, I guess Gibson, who owns KRK, or if they still own KRK, I'm not sure. He was telling me that, we're going to do an update to the V4s. Mm-hmm. And eventually, when they finally had them, he pulled me aside and said, hey, you got to come check these out. And he had the KRK V4s sitting right next to a set of the Genelec 1029As and had the AB switch and allowed me to plug in music that I know extremely well. I'd listen to it in the Genelecs and then be like, oh, okay, this sounds like it's supposed to sound. Then I'd flip the switch and listen to the KRK V4s and be like, oh my God, it's like somebody just pulled the wool out of my ears.
Wow.
It was a night and day difference. So I immediately was like, okay, Rich, where do I give you the money?
Yeah, I can't wait. I haven't been in your studio since you moved, but I would love to hear those and see what they are.
They're awesome.
You mentioned the Genelecs, the old trusty Genelecs right now, the 1029As. Again,
Yes.
they don't make these anymore. And
I got
that's
the
what
last
I
Logic board.
Oh, yeah, because you have to have your
I had one of my Logic boards and one of my Genelecs went out, and I ordered the last available Logic board. Now, unless they've made more, I am the one guy that got the last one.
Wow. All right. Well, good for you. So, because that's the monitor that I use. And I remember being turned on to these. This was when you had your LA studio.
Yes.
And I can't remember what I was using at the time, but I went to your place and I listened to the 9 Inch Nails track off of The Fragile, one of the instrumental pieces. And I remember this vividly. Like there's a song and it has like a really low cello in the song, just like these droney kind of things. And I'm like, oh my God, I can hear the bowing of the cello. That was so revealing. I'm like, I gotta have these. And I have been using them ever since. I do like the Genelecs. I know some people don't like them for whatever reason. I don't know, but I'm a big fan. And that's what I'm using at this point.
All right. So now that we're over our fanboying of the type of monitor speakers that we actually use, what is one particular difference that you're getting from the monitors that you're not really getting from the headphones?
Well, that's again is the stereo field, right? You hear what it sounds like in an actual room,
Which means you're getting a true room sound.
Right, for better or worse, because again, we talked about, not every room is created equal, right?
True that.
So it depends on how well your room is treated. That was easy for me to say, to get the most out of your monitors, right? You could buy and have the best monitors in the world that you've read that everybody uses, but they will only be as good as your room is.
Yes.
To a certain degree. And that can be a tough pill to swallow because it is very unsexy, I think, to put down a lot of money on improving, with baffles and bass traps and all this kind of stuff in your room. It's not fun, right? So it's like, I just want to buy cool monitors and I have a big, beautiful white cone that all the other, hits were mixed on, right?
Sure.
But it's not as simple as that.
No, it's not. And I believe I've enlisted your help. I know I've enlisted the help of others for various studio setups that I have done where it's like, hey, can you go hold a mirror on the wall for me? So I can set up my baffling and everything so that it's going to properly dampen and create the proper room sound and tuning in this room.
Yeah, no,
done that more than
that
once.
was fun. I remember that. Yeah, and actually, you got a bit of a write-up in SOS for that, right? Because that was one of those room rescue things.
I did get a write-up in Sound on Sound.
See, you're famous.
Not really, but let's move on.
No, but the treatment it's a little bit beyond the episode of this podcast. Maybe we'll do something at that. We've had some requests for that, so maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode. But you are obviously dependent on your room. And there are things that we can do to better ourselves. to get the most out of our monitors. There's another problem or issue that you might want to think about when you're choosing your monitors as well, and that is the size of your room.
Yes.
Right. It can be very tempting to get the biggest and the best. And you mentioned like your KRK 4s.
Yes.
Right. They're not the biggest monitors, and neither are mine. Like I said,
No.
the 1029s. But I sit in a relatively small space.
Yes.
So having
you mentioning that, I initially wanted to get the V8s.
Yeah,
which is the next size
it's
up.
going to look so much better,
Well,
right? Yeah.
You want to be pounded in the head with sound in the chest and in the groin everywhere. You want to feel it. However, for the room that I'm currently in, that did not make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
The good thing, though, is that I do have these paired with the KRK sub that goes with them. And in doing that, this sub actually works with the 8s or the 4s.
So
if I go to the 8s, I will still be able to use the same sub.
More than likely, probably just adjust the crossover, I would guess. But
yeah, the crossover would be adjusted. The volume level will probably be adjusted as well. Yeah.
But that's something to think about when you're choosing monitors, right? If you have a larger room, you might have to go a little bit bigger than to just have a small cone like V4s or
right.
The Genelecs that I'm using here. But it can be tempting, like I said, to have the biggest ones like a big 8 when you think, oh, I'm going to get all this low end. Right. And while that technically be true, it can create more issues than the positives because you might not have proper bass trapping or everything, and it just ends up bouncing around your room. And you're doing
there's other
disservice.
Things that have to be taken into consideration is the amount of sound that the speaker is spitting out and where it's going to actually be ideal in terms of the amount of power it takes to drive that speaker. Yeah. And that's another reason why you want to be considerate of the size of your room when you're going for the size of your speaker. Because the bigger they are, the further away you want to sit from them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. And possibly, like you said, you might need to drive them a little bit harder and all this kind of stuff, and that may not be practical in the room where you are. And you shouldn't be mixing that loud anyway. So
No.
Right. Maybe we should touch a little bit on, again, like if you have a smaller speaker, it can be a good solution to, like you mentioned, to have a sub paired with it.
I would pair a sub anyway, but yes.
Would you?
Yeah.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Have you found that it's changed your workflow, or is it just easier for you to hear the subs, essentially, because a smaller speaker is not going to be able to reproduce as low as 40 or 50 perhaps, right? Or and below. So
technically speaking, in the room that I'm currently in, it's probably not the wisest decision to have a sub. However, even though I still have a sub, setting the proper level with it and the proper crossover frequency and everything does allow me to hear/feel certain low-end aspects of the mix that I would not be able to hear on either the Genelecs or the KRKs or any singular self-powered monitor system that I could put in here that is appropriate for the size of the room.
And when you say level, you're talking about actual volume of the sub now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You used a word there, which is important as well to kind of keep in mind, that you said feel.
Yep.
And when you get down to certain frequencies, it's almost like you feel them more than you hear them, right? If you notice that when you turn on your sub, like your desk is shaking, there might be too much stuff going on.
Yes.
Yeah, well, there might be too much stuff going on down there, right? So it can be very revealing. I have chosen to go without a sub, but what I do, because the Genelecs don't go down very far, I think they actually go down only to about 60, which is pretty high.
I'm going to say 70.
I'm going to say 60, but okay. We'll have to arm wrestle on that or break out the documentation. What I tend to do is that's when I tend to check in headphones as well, just to kind of make sure that, okay, what I think is there is actually there, and avoiding the temptation of mixing with our eyes, right, and just having like a spectrogram in front of you. It's like, okay, well, there is something going on down there, but to make sure I'm hearing what I intend to hear,
right,
I tend to go with a headphone thing just to double check that. At this point, because I've been using them for a while, so I'm relatively tuned into them. So I kind of know what.
Except for when you turn SonarWorks on and off.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was a big thing. Absolutely. So maybe we'll go into that.
Sure.
What about
using both and doing a mix is you got your monitors, you have your headphones. Some people will even pull out singular monitor speakers like the Aratones.
Oh, yeah.
To check their mixes.
And I think that's great because when you hear it, there's even like, I can't remember who it is is it Audio Modern or company like that do what they call like the mix checker, which is, essentially just it removes certain frequencies and emulates those things. But you're talking about a real life thing where you're checking your mix on a mono designed to sound shitty speaker, like the Oratone. Because that's what they are.
I'm not sure they would say that it would be designed to be sounding shitty, but yeah.
Well, no, but it's not. I don't think I'm stepping on any toes where I'm saying that it is what it is. It is a mix check, and they're not designing that to be your primary speaker.
Right.
It is for that purpose to count. I believe that they're relatively mid-heavy and not a whole lot else, right? So it can reveal stuff that is present in your mix that may not be as obvious in another environment.
Sure.
So people do that. And I mean, people check their mixes these days on earbuds and stuff, right? Yep. So because that's how a lot of people are listening to music these days. Yeah, so you want to make sure it's going to translate relatively well, I guess.
Yes. Well, that's the idea of using both headphones of multiple kinds and or the type that people tend to use, in addition to the studio monitors that you have.
Yeah, so everything is basically just different tools to help you make sure that your mix translates, which is, I think, one of the hardest things. Like when we start out, if we don't realize how poorly our room might sound because we have no other reference, right? And then it's the old, let's go out and listen to the car type of thing. And then you go, wow, what happened, right? Or if you're lucky, it's like, yeah, that went great on the first try. Great,
Well, then there's also the aspect of having other mixing engineer friends that you can send mixes to and say, hey, what do you think of this?
Definitely.
And they have a different setup than you, and they are going to hear different things than you, and they can give you good feedback if they know what they're talking about.
And that is a good thing. And whenever you get that feedback, don't take it personally. Remember, you're asking for a good thing. You're not asking them to just stroke your ego. And if they go, hey, this sounds great, awesome, you've done your job. But if they go, hey, I think your left guitar is a little bit too loud in the bridge or whatever it is, take that to heart and maybe reconsider it. We talked about different environments, but there is a lot of room correction software now. Or there's the big one that you and I talk about a lot is now Sound ID. It used to be SonarWorks, right?
Well, it's made by SonarWorks. It's called Sound ID now.
That was when I got that. It really, really, really improved my mixes. Was
it like getting a spanking and saying, here, now you can do it right?
I'm trying to think of a sexual joke, but I can't. But it was very revealing. I started noticing that the issues that my room had, even though I'm not sitting in a professionally tuned room, I've done the best that I can in the room that I'm in, but there's still issues. And SonarWorks has taken care of that because it showed me that I know I had a bump in around the 110 mark or something. My mixes never sounded full because I would compensate by that by bringing down those frequencies. Having those removed from my listening path and compensating for the room allowed me to make more educated decisions because I could actually hear. We can't fix what we can't hear. Right. And the same thing again, going for headphones when I check there's another profile right there. So great tools. I wouldn't, unless I was in like a really amazing room, I would not mix without them.
Well, but even in a really amazing room, it helps substantially to have 4 or 5 tracks that the entire ins and outs based on a variety of different listening environments to give yourself your own reference tools to what that room is supposed to sound like.
Yeah.
If you're not going to use SonarWorks. I'll just go right out on a limb and say right now, one of my primo tracks to listen to in order to understand a room like that is Red Rain by Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
The range on that song is insane.
When you do that, you kind of get a picture of what's happening in the low end, what's happening at the top, and presumably all mid-range as well. Like you start noticing if it's certain notes, if something is missing somewhere, or if it's heavy in certain frequencies. Is that so? How long does that process kind of take you? Is that at this point, is that pretty much instant for you now?
Pretty close. And I do it whether it's monitor speakers or headphone speakers. That's like my go-to song, like one of my go-to songs right there, Red Rain.
Okay, yeah. Could be a lot worse songs than that, right? So, yeah. No, that's really interesting. Now, a new thing is the technology now where using headphones, we can get the sense of sitting in a different room and mixing.
Sure.
Like I mentioned, like the Slate VSX, right? Waves have their own one. It's got the NX series. I think there's like an Ocean Way in Nashville, and they have Mix LA here in LA, the Chris Lord Algae Room. There's others as well, like D-Sonic has a product called Real Phones. Compensating for, your hype of your headphone, it attempts to binaurally put you in a space that is an actual room that is tuned and professionally treated and all this kind of stuff. Have you tried those out? And if so, what's your experience with them?
I haven't actually tried them out. The thing that would bother me about it is whether or not they have the profile of the headphones. If they don't have the profile of the headphones that I'm using, it doesn't matter what room they set me in because it's going to be hyped by whatever headphone I'm using. So they have to be able to remove the headphone hype before they set me in the room.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Slate does, right? Because you get the headphones, right?
Oh, so the Slate system is the headphones that you have to get.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
I think the Real Phones one, the D-Sonic ones, they have certain profiles for your headphones as well.
Right.
I'm not sure that the Waves one does. And if
it doesn't, I think that's a problem.
I think so too. But one thing that I tried, because I tried the Waves one and I've tried the Real Phones one, and you have to allow yourself to get used to doing that.
Sure.
Because it is a very, very different feeling than just listening in regular headphones, because you're sort of losing that directional thing that we talked about with the stereo image, right? Mm-hmm. For me, I have had a hard time getting used to it. But I'm pretty happy with my room where I sit most of the time. But as a second pair of headphones, I would be very intrigued to kind of try the Slate thing.
But the one thing that I'll kind of point out is that people tend to say, well, if you can make it sound good on these, it's going to sound good anywhere. And the reality of that is like, no, that's not true. You have to know your system. You have to know what's going on, and you have to have it in a setup that doesn't technically lie to you on a grand scale. All systems are going to lie. It's how much you can remove the extraneous portions of the lie that will help you get to a good mix. Yeah. And that's the reality.
Yeah, I remember hearing that a lot early on when it's basically an excuse for people to say, oh, I know I got shitty speakers in a shitty room, but if I could make it sound good on these, it's going to sound great everywhere. It doesn't mean that it's going to translate. And that can sound harsh, but that's just the reality of it.
Sure.
To wrap this up, I think learn what your headphones or what your monitors sound like. Get really, really comfortable with that.
And with that, we will move on to Friday Finds. Chris, what do you have?
I have another find to Outputs Arcade. That is now version 2.0 that I really, really enjoyed. There's been some new implementation. It's the GUI has changed and developed a little bit. I noticed that there have been some bugs fixed. Hint, hint. Also, what they've added now with this engine is that you have a lot more control of playing pitched samples. What I mean by that, in past versions, you could play a sample and you could adjust what pitch that was being played back at. And you have a relatively rudimentary control over that. But now that has changed so that you have a little bit more control over that. You could actually treat it more like an instrument. And that is a cool thing. Arcade 2.0 by Output is my find of this Friday. What about you, Jody? What do you got?
Well, I'm taking a look at the IK Multimedia Tascam tape plugins. So for for all of you young guys that wished that you could have started like Chris and I technically did on Tascam Porta Studios, you can now get that Tascam Porta Studio sound. Maybe not exactly the same way as we did it, but you can at least have that concept in your wheelhouse because they've gone through and they have emulated the recording and playheads of the Porta 1 Studio. In addition to that, they've done a couple of others like the 388, which I'm kind of curious to wonder why they didn't do the 688.
I don't know.
The reality is those machines were actually quite clever machines, and they were very good at getting the average musician the ability to record themselves on a multi-track. And They were small, they were portable, they were great. They could run on batteries or on AC power. It was awesome. Great way to start out for recording. However, we're well beyond that now. But if you want that kind of tape quality type thing, you can now get it from IK Multimedia with their Tascam tape collection. And that's my Friday find.
Very cool.
While we've got your attention, we would like you to go to our website and leave us a review at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com/review, or go to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our email list. You'll get weekly reminders about the tips that we put out every Tuesday, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes. And the real bonus is when we hold giveaways, you're automatically entered to win. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com with the word monitoring, and you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic of suggestion for Chris and I to explain in a future episode, contact us via the contact page, and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. And with that, I will say, see you next week.
Have a good one, Jody. Thanks for listening, everybody.